After 10 hours of sweat and concrete, I was running on fumes. My back ached, my boots were caked in dry mud, and the only thing on my mind was grabbing a sandwich and maybe 15 quiet minutes where nobody needed anything from me. I pulled into the small cafe a few blocks from the site, one of those tucked-away places with warm lights, decent food, and furniture that didn't try too hard to be hip. Just solid chairs and a clean table. That's all I wanted. A place to breathe. I stepped inside, ducking slightly through the low doorframe, and the bell chimed above me. The scent of fresh coffee and baked bread wrapped around me like a comfort I hadn't realized I'd been missing. It should have been a good moment. But then I saw her. Brooke. My wife. She was at a window table in the back corner, sunlight pouring in behind her like some cruel spotlight. She hadn't seen me yet. I almost wished I hadn't seen her. She was feeding a toddler, maybe a year, maybe a bit older, with careful, practiced movements. The kid was laughing, leaning forward eagerly with each bite. The kind of joy that comes from knowing you're cared for. Safe. Loved. The child wasn't sitting in a high chair. He was resting in the lap of a man I didn't recognize. Dark hair, well-kept beard, maybe late 30s. The kind of guy who wears a quarter-zip sweater even when it's 80 degrees and somehow pulls it off. Brooke's left hand, her wedding ring hand, was resting casually on the back of his chair. Not touching him exactly, but not touching him either. Her body leaned slightly toward his, angled like it belonged in that space. She was smiling, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. Maybe longer. I just stood there. Frozen. It took her a few seconds to notice me, but when she did, her whole face shifted. There was a flicker, barely noticeable if you weren't watching for it. Her mouth stopped moving. Her hand retracted like it had touched a hot stove. Her spine straightened. Then she smiled. Waved like this was nothing out of the ordinary. Hey! She mouthed across the cafe, gesturing for me to come over like she'd just run into an old friend, not her husband of 7 years. I didn't move. I don't even think I blinked. She stood up, careful not to jostle the man or the baby, and made her way over with that same too-wide smile. There was a strange look in her eyes, something between guilt and calculation. She brushed a hair behind her ear the way she does when she's nervous and then laughed softly. Mark, she said. What are you doing here? That was rich? I could have asked her the same thing. I was just grabbing lunch, I said, managing to keep my voice steady. Didn't know you'd be here? Oh, it's just a community thing, she said quickly. This is for the support group. You know, the one I told you about, the family outreach program? That's Connor. She nodded toward the baby. And that's Jason. He's a coworker. Well, not my coworker, he works with the program. I nodded, still trying to process what I was seeing. My brain was lagging behind reality like a computer stuck buffering. Coworker. Support group. Casual touch. An asterisk mate posture. You didn't mention you'd be out today. She shrugged, too casual. It was last minute. Someone couldn't make it and they asked if I could fill in. Just helping out. Just helping out. With her hand on his chair, with a kid nestled on his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't ask more. I just nodded, pretending to buy it. Right? Well, enjoy your lunch. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, maybe explain, maybe deflect, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned, walked out the door, and got back into my truck. My hands were shaking. I sat there, engine idling, watching people stroll past with their coffees and laptops like the world wasn't splintering inside me. I stared into the side mirror and caught a glimpse of her through the cafe window. She'd gone back to the table, smiling again, laughing at something Jason said. The baby was tugging on her sleeve and she let him. She didn't pull away. Something twisted in my gut. A tight, nauseating knot that only grew tighter the longer I sat there. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't the jealous type either. But I wasn't blind. The thing that got me wasn't just the kid, or the man, or the hand on the chair. It was her face. The ease. The comfort. The warmth I hadn't seen directed at me in months. There had been signs. I knew that even before I turned the ignition. I just hadn't let myself add them up. Not until now. Driving home, I barely noticed the streets I'd driven for years. The familiar turns, the cracked sidewalks, the rusting mailbox on the corner, they blurred into static as something else took over. My brain started working backward, unpacking boxes I'd stacked neatly in the back of my mind, telling myself they weren't worth opening. Now they cracked wide open. The signs weren't loud. They didn't announce themselves with fireworks or confrontation. No, they were subtle. Insidious. Like water seeping through a ceiling, quiet until the whole thing collapses. It started with late nights. At first, it made sense. Brooke had joined a local support group, something about women navigating burnout and work-life stress. I'd encouraged it, honestly. She'd been struggling, overwhelmed, exhausted. I figured a safe space, some community, why not? I even helped her find the number. But somewhere along the way, the group went from monthly to weekly. Then twice a week. Then weekend retreats. And that's when the phrase started showing up, "It's just for women, no partners allowed." Said casually with a wave of her hand and a peck on the cheek. Nothing personal. I didn't push back. I trusted her. God, I trusted her. Then there were the deleted texts. I noticed one night while we were watching a movie. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, smiled, typed something quickly, and when I leaned over to peek, nothing. Message gone. I didn't say anything then, but once it happens, you start watching for it. And it happened again. And again. She got better at hiding it. Started putting her phone face down. Started locking her screen. Changed her passcode from our anniversary to something random. Said it was for privacy because of sensitive group conversations. It wasn't a lie, technically. There was that trip to Phoenix, too. Supposed to be another retreat. 3 days, she said. She came back with a glow, sun-kissed skin, soft curls from a beachy blowout. She smelled different. A new perfume, she said, picked it up at the airport. Called it something fresh. It didn't smell fresh to me. It smelled like change. Like a place I hadn't been invited. Then came the cologne. I found it in her gym bag while looking for Advil. A small bottle, travel-sized, sleek, expensive-looking. Not a scent I recognized. She said it was a farewell gift from a colleague who was moving to Chicago. He didn't know what else to get everyone, so he just gave out little things, she explained, laughing it off. It's not like I wear it. I wanted to believe her. So I did. Now, sitting in traffic with my hands gripping the wheel and my stomach still knotted from that cafe scene, I felt like an idiot. All those signs I dismissed, they lined up perfectly now. Clicked together like puzzle pieces I hadn't realized were part of the same picture. And the picture wasn't flattering. It showed a man working late to build a future while his wife built something else, separate, secret. A life I wasn't part of. A face she showed others, one that looked lighter, freer. When had she stopped smiling like that around me? I thought back to our last date night. 3 weeks ago. I'd made reservations at her favorite Thai place. Bought her a new sweater she'd been eyeing online. She showed up distracted, barely touched her food, and scrolled her phone under the table more than once. Said she had a lot on her mind. Said she was tired. We used to talk for hours. Now, conversation felt like walking on glass barefoot, every step calculated, careful. One wrong word and she'd retreat into herself, nodding along with that half-smile she reserved for checkout clerks and coworkers she didn't actually like. Then there was her laugh. She'd started laughing in a different way. Softer. Slower. It wasn't forced, it was familiar. Like someone had rehearsed it with her. Like someone had earned it. It wasn't me. I pulled into her driveway, heart hammering. The house looked the same. Lights off. Porch empty. The hanging plants drooped a little from the heat, and the mail was still sticking out of the box like a tired hand reaching for attention. I sat in the car a while longer. In the passenger seat was an old gym towel, still crusted from last week. In the cup holder, a half-empty energy drink from that morning. I stared at it, fixated on the stupid condensation ring forming underneath, and thought, this is what I've become. A man surrounded by the leftovers of someone else's secrets. When I finally stepped inside, the quiet hit me harder than usual. Our place wasn't big. Just a 2-bedroom rental with creaky floors and a front door that needed a hard shove in winter. But it had been ours. We painted the walls ourselves. We picked out the rug that never stayed in place. We hung the frame of our wedding photo, off-center, always. Now it all felt like a set. Staged. Too tidy. Too curated. She wasn't home. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. A Tupperware of something I didn't recognize sat front and center. Lentil stew, maybe? Something she'd said she wanted to try after one of her group nights. I'd passed on it. Now it sat untouched. On the counter, her phone buzzed. She never left it behind. Ever. I stared at it. Screen lit up. A name I didn't recognize. Just a first name, no last. But the preview said enough. Can't wait to see you again. Hope he doesn't ruin tonight. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The signs had been there. Always. I just hadn't wanted to believe they meant anything. And now I couldn't believe anything else. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. I hadn't slept much. My mind played a relentless reel of the cafe, her hand on that chair, the toddler's laugh. The message preview flashing on her screen the night before, hope he doesn't ruin tonight. That was me. I was he. A footnote in my own marriage. I didn't bring it up over breakfast. I couldn't. She'd come home late, said the meeting ran over. I nodded. Said nothing. My words were backed up behind a dam, waiting for the crack. She was gone before 8. Off to another outreach shift. Or maybe a retreat. Maybe a hotel. I waited. When I was sure she wouldn't be back soon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I picked up her phone. It felt wrong. Felt like trespassing in a home I used to own. But I had to know. Because suspicion eats you from the inside. Doubt corrodes everything. The screen was locked. She'd changed her passcode again. I stared at it. Then remembered Brooke was predictable. Her old gym locker combination had been 1990. Her birth year. I tried it. Nothing. Then I tried 2009. Our anniversary. The screen blinked open. And that was it. The dam broke. Her message threads were clean. Too clean. But the archive chats weren't. Most people forget that archiving isn't deleting. The name from last night's preview was there. J. I opened the thread. It was all there. Weeks of messages. Photos. Plans. Check-ins. Inside jokes I didn't recognize. Codes and nicknames and winks in the form of emojis. And the pictures. The first one hit like A.S. asterisk Kerpunch Brooke in a hotel robe standing in front of a full-length mirror. The date stamp read 2 Tuesdays ago, the night she said she was volunteering late. The next showed her lying on white sheets, her hair spread across the pillow. Eyes closed. Peaceful. Vulnerable. Like I used to see her after long conversations about the future. But it wasn't me behind the camera. The texts below the photo said everything. You looked perfect tonight. So glad we finally had time to ourselves. Hope you're not too sore. Winking face. I had to set the phone down. My hands were shaking too much. I closed my eyes, but the images stayed. I should have stopped there. I should have put the phone back and walked away. But when you're standing in a burning building, you don't stop at the first flame. You look for the source. I scrolled further. Receipts. Digital check-ins. Hotel confirmations under her name. Cash payments. All of it neatly documented. Efficient. Thoughtful. She wasn't just having an affair. She was organized about it. There was even a folder in her photo gallery labeled work stuff. I opened it. Inside were **TS of calendar entries. Blocked off weekends. Excuses mapped out in advance. She had planned it all. I stood there in our kitchen looking out the window at the backyard we tried to garden together, feeling like a stranger had written over my life in pen. And still I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't yell. Instead, I picked up a few moving boxes from the garage. I packed her things. Deliberate. Careful. One drawer at a time. Her books. Her skincare products lined up in the order she used them. Her favorite mug that said Boss Babe. Every item went into a box with labels. Like I was organizing an estate sale for a marriage that had died quietly in its sleep. When I was done, I placed the stack of boxes in the hallway. On the dining table, I set down the divorce packet I'd picked up weeks ago when the signs had first started to feel like more than bad dreams. I didn't fill it out yet, but I wanted her to see it. To know I wasn't in the dark anymore. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Her scent still hung in the air, a mix of coconut shampoo and something floral that wasn't hers until recently. Something new. Something he probably liked. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the grief was already familiar. I'd been mourning her for months without knowing it. That evening, she walked in like it was any other day. Keys jingling, soft humming, shoes off at the door. Then she saw the boxes. She stopped mid-step. Mark, what is this? I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her. Her eyes darted from the boxes to the divorce packet on the table. This looks extreme, she said, her voice pitching upward. Can we talk? I shook my head. Not right now. She took a step forward, her tone softening. If this is about yesterday at the cafe, it wasn't what it looked like. No? I asked quietly. Then what was it? A community event. I told you, Jason works with the outreach program. And the hotel? I interrupted. The robe? The texts? Hope he doesn't ruin tonight. What part of that was about community service? Her face paled. She stumbled back a half step like I'd slapped her. How did you? I looked. I said. I had to. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Then she did something I didn't expect. She dropped her bag, leaned against the wall and slid to the floor. Just sat there, like she didn't know how to fight anymore. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. I stayed standing. You planned it. You documented it. You gave it a folder. She didn't respond. I sat across from her on the floor, the hallway between us littered with shadows. Why him? I asked finally. She stared at the floor. I don't know. He saw me, made me feel real, like I mattered. And I didn't? You stopped looking at me, she said. Stopped hearing me. I felt something fracture inside me. I was building us a life, I said. I was breaking my back to give us a future. I didn't ask for all that, she said. Not cruelly, just tired. I asked for you. We sat in silence again. I didn't move the boxes, didn't raise my voice. I just let it all hang there. Eventually, she stood up and went to the bedroom. I heard her crying behind the door. I didn't follow. There wasn't anything left to say, only choices to make. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my eyes tracing invisible cracks that weren't there but might as well have been. The silence of the house was a living thing, pressing against me with each breath. Every creak of the floorboard upstairs, every faint rustle of movement from the bedroom, reminded me she was still here, still in this house, still under my roof. But something fundamental had shifted. The trust, the foundation, the warmth I'd fought to keep alive. It had all been hollowed out from underneath. By morning, I'd made my decision. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't want a dramatic explosion. I didn't want revenge or answers or one last emotional plea. What I wanted, what I needed, was clarity. So I acted. I got up before sunrise, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. I moved quietly through the house. I didn't want to wake her, not because I was being considerate, but because I needed space. I needed a clean moment, uninterrupted. I started packing. Her closet first. Her dresses, blouses, scarves folded neatly, not a wrinkle out of place. Then her nightstand. The books she'd been meaning to read, the journal she used to keep, the lavender oil she swore helped her sleep. Box after box. I didn't rush. I moved with the same quiet purpose I'd always brought to work. Measure twice. Cut once. Do the job right. I labeled everything: bedroom, bathroom, office. I stacked the boxes by the front door, each one a statement she couldn't ignore. By 8 a.m. I was done. The house looked lighter, emptier, like it could finally exhale. The last thing I did was place the divorce papers on the kitchen table. Not filled out yet, just sitting there, face up, pen clipped to the top. Next to it I left a note. Not angry, not accusatory, just simple. Everything you need is here. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to beg. I just can't do this anymore. Please be gone before I get back. I locked the door behind me and drove aimlessly for hours. Through the hills, past the lake, into neighborhoods I hadn't visited in years. I stopped at a gas station, got a coffee I didn't drink, and sat in the lot with the windows rolled down, letting the warm breeze wash over me. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was movement. It was forward. When I finally came back that evening, the house was dark. The porch light was off. No car in the driveway. For a brief, stupid second, I wondered if she'd ignored everything. If she was inside, making dinner, pretending none of it had happened. But when I stepped through the door, I knew. She was gone. The boxes were gone. The clothes. The smell of her perfume that always lingered in the hallway. Gone. On the table, the divorce packet sat where I'd left it. The pen was gone. The papers were filled out. Signed. She'd written a note on the back of the last page. I won't fight you. I'm sorry. That was it. No name. No explanation. Just those 4 words. I stood there for a long time, letting the emptiness settle around me. The bedroom looked sterile now. The closet half empty. The bed made with a precision that wasn't mine. No stray socks. No scattered earrings. No lingering laughter in the corners. I didn't cry. Maybe I was past that. Or maybe the grief had become so dense it just folded in on itself. I walked through the house slowly, room by room, taking in the changes. Her absence was everywhere, and yet traces of her clung to things like static. The mug she forgot on the counter. The playlist still open on her laptop. A scarf left hanging behind the door. I boxed them up too, carefully, without sentiment. It wasn't about erasing her. It was about reclaiming the space. That night, I didn't sleep much. But I did lie down in our bed, my bed now, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like I was sleeping next to a stranger. It just felt like sleeping alone. The next few days passed in a blur. I went to work. I showed up. I did the job. No one asked questions. I didn't offer stories. When I came home, the silence still met me at the door, but it felt less oppressive. I started opening windows, playing music, rearranging furniture. I didn't throw anything away, but I did make changes. Subtle things. A new rug in the living room. New sheets on the bed. I deleted her Spotify account from the shared plan. I wasn't being petty. I was rebuilding. One night, I went into the guest room. It had become a storage space over the years, old boxes, and used equipment, holiday decorations in disarray. I dug through the closet looking for a fishing rod, a distraction. What I found instead was a box labeled Brooke, Old Biz Docs. I remembered it from our early days when we tried starting a small online shop together. It didn't last long. Life got in the way. I pulled the box out, blew off the dust, and opened it. Inside were receipts, invoices, and a stack of old emails printed out. Why she had printed them, I didn't know. But there they were. One envelope stood out, handwritten, addressed to someone named Tommy. Curious, I opened it. The letter was dated 5 years ago. Her handwriting was shaky, different from now. But the words were hers. Unmistakably. Tommy, I can't stop thinking about that night in Austin. I don't know what it means. I don't even know what I'm doing. But something shifted in me. In my body, in my head. I love Mark. I do. But sometimes I wonder if I rushed into this. If I mistook comfort for chemistry. I hate feeling like this. But I had to say it. I sat back, the paper trembling in my hand. This wasn't new. This wasn't a sudden collapse. This was a slow erosion. A timeline I'd never known about. A history she'd lived parallel to mine. She'd had doubts. She'd explored other roads. And she never told me. Even then, she'd been elsewhere. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and closed the box. It didn't matter anymore. But somehow it still did. That night, I left the letter on the dining table. Not as a message to her. As a reminder to myself. The signs had been there. Not just recently. All along. I just hadn't wanted to read them. The letter sat on the table for 2 days before I could bring myself to touch it again. It haunted me. Sitting there in its envelope like a time bomb, quiet and lethal. Every time I passed by, I caught myself glancing at it. Wondering who Tommy really was, what happened that night in Austin, and how many other chapters of Brooke's life I'd never been invited to read. We'd lived together for 7 years, shared a mortgage, a Spotify account, taxes, fights, holidays, late-night grocery runs, and quiet moments brushing our teeth side by side. And yet somehow, there were entire volumes of her life I never even knew existed. On the 3rd evening, I finally opened the box again. The email printouts weren't organized, just tossed in like old receipts. Some were harmless business invoices, communication with our web designer, supplier quotes from back when we thought we were going to be entrepreneurs. But others were private. One was an email exchange from 4 years ago between Brooke and someone named Jenna, a close friend from college I barely remembered. Brooke had written, "Sometimes I dream about packing a bag and leaving. Not because Mark's a bad husband, he's not. He's kind. He's steady. But I feel invisible. Like I'm living a life someone else wrote for me." Jenna had replied supportively, encouraging her to take time for herself, to rediscover who you are. Brooke had responded, "I tried. But when I do things on my own, I feel guilty. Like I'm cheating on him emotionally. But I also don't feel like me when I'm with him anymore. He stopped asking questions. I stopped offering answers. That one hurt more than I expected. Because I could remember those nights she was probably talking about. Nights when I'd come home too tired to talk, or when I'd asked how her day was and accepted fine as a full answer. I folded the emails back up, sat for a while in silence. I wasn't excusing her betrayal. Couldn't. But now I could see the cracks had started forming long before she ever met Jason. Maybe even before Phoenix. Maybe even before we said, I do. The next envelope was different, thicker, sealed in a way that suggested it was meant to stay closed. But it had my name on it, just Mark written in her handwriting. My chest tightened as I opened it. Inside was a typed letter 3 pages long, dated 2 years ago. It started with, I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I had to write it. For me. Maybe for you too. I'm in the middle of something I can't name, but it's changing me. I keep trying to bring it into our home, into our life, but it doesn't fit. So I leave pieces of myself outside instead. And now I feel like I live 2 lives. She talked about a man named Eli. Not Jason. Not Tommy. Someone else. She'd met him at an emotional rehabilitation center, some kind of retreat she'd signed up for one weekend when I thought she was visiting her sister. Eli was a therapist there. Or had been. She said their connection started in group discussions, then coffee after, then long walks on the property. The letter didn't go into graphic detail. It didn't need to. The implication was clear. She described it as a relapse not into addiction but into longing. Into being seen, heard, and touched in ways that weren't dutiful or scheduled. That phrase stuck with me. Brooke admitted it had gone too far. That Eli had later been reported by another attendee. Lost his license. Disappeared. And she had come home. To me. Determined, she said, to make things work. She wrote, I made a promise to myself, no more secrets. No more escapes. I would fix what I'd broken before it cracked open. But she hadn't told me. Instead, she buried the letter in a box. That was her version of coming clean. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the dampness hit the paper. Not sobbing. Just leaking. The kind of grief that doesn't come with noise. Just pressure. This wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't even a single betrayal. It was a history. A private roadmap she'd followed alone while I stayed on the main road, wondering why we kept circling the same exits. That night, I went back through our wedding album. Not out of nostalgia, but out of need. I wanted to see if the signs had been there even then. In her smile. In her posture. I couldn't tell. We looked happy. Or at least, young enough to believe we knew what happiness meant. It wasn't just about Brooke anymore. It was about me too. The version of me that had become predictable. Dependable. Background noise in someone else's story. The next day, I called out of work. Told them I needed time off. No excuses. No explanations. I wasn't unraveling. I was sorting. I spent the day going through every shared space, clearing shelves, boxing up memories, deciding what to keep and what to release. It wasn't anger driving me. It was clarity. Brooke had been living 2 lives. Now it was time I started living one. Mine. That evening, I wrote a letter back. Not to her, but to myself. It began. You are not the ghost of someone else's regret. You are not a placeholder. You are not invisible. You are a man who stayed when it got hard. You are the kind of man who keeps showing up. And now you get to show up for yourself. I didn't know where this was going, or what came next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt the beginning of something. Not revenge. Not repair. Just release. It had been about a week since I found the letter. I'd stopped looking for more. Not because I thought I'd seen it all, but because I finally realized there would always be more. More things I'd never know. More truths she buried in places I couldn't reach. And digging through the ruins wasn't going to build anything back. Then, one evening, someone knocked on the door. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't expecting anyone. But curiosity outweighed fatigue. She was maybe mid-40s. Hair pulled into a loose bun, jacket slung over one arm like she'd just walked out of a long day. She looked familiar in that way that made you feel like you were supposed to remember her but didn't. Hi, she said gently. Are you Mark? Yes, I said, wary. Can I help you? My name is Claire, she replied. I used to be a counselor at the Mindbridge Center in Sedona. That name hit like a low echo. Sedona. The retreat Brooke went to for clarity. The one I now realized was less about healing and more about redefinition. I'm sorry to come unannounced, she continued. But I thought you should have this. She handed me an envelope. My name, in Brooke's handwriting, was written across the front. I didn't open it right away. Claire seemed hesitant to leave. I wasn't supposed to be involved, she said, but after she left, I started to piece things together. She had a connection with someone on staff. One of the therapists. It wasn't appropriate. He was let go. And she asked me to give you this. If I ever saw you. She turned to leave, then paused. Whatever that letter says, it wasn't your fault. I stood there a long time after she left. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like the last puzzle piece you don't really want to place because you already know what the picture is. When I opened it, the letter inside was typed clinical in its language. She called it a relapse. Said her connection with the therapist, Eli, was transformational. Said it opened something in her. Called it part of her healing journey. And somewhere in the middle of that paragraph was a line I'll never forget. Even as I was promising to rebuild us, I was already somewhere else. That was the truth of it. I didn't throw the letter away. I just folded it quietly, placed it in the same box as the others, and slid it back into the closet. A week later, I drove to the old fishing cabin my grandfather used to own. It was deep in the woods, far from cell service, farther from noise. I brought a notebook, a bag of groceries, and a stack of old vinyl I hadn't touched since college. No internet, no distractions, just space. At first, the silence felt unbearable. Every room echoed. Every creak reminded me of the absence. But slowly it started to shift. I started cooking again, simple meals, bacon and eggs in the morning, fresh fish grilled at night. I started writing, too. Not about Brooke. Not about the past. Just about myself. Who I was before all this. Who I might still be. There were no big revelations. No grand emotional breakthroughs. But I remembered how it felt to be alone and not feel lonely. That was enough. When I returned to the city, I felt different. Lighter. Not healed. Not whole. But no longer waiting for closure from someone who never knew how to offer it. I boxed the rest of her things, whatever she'd left behind after that quiet exit. Her books, scarves, old mementos. I set them by the door with a simple note. I don't hate you, but I don't carry you anymore. She never came to pick them up. She never wrote back. And I didn't expect her to. The final chapter wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was quiet. Because this story wasn't about revenge. It was about choosing yourself even after someone else doesn't. And finally, I did.